everybody, it's Tuesday, February 25th, and welcome to Good Day NWA. I'm Mackenzie Holtzclaw.
And I'm Jason Sewell. Here's what's coming up on today's show. Mardi Gras is just 1 week away, but how much do you really know about the celebration? We've got our celebrity historian friend Raffi Andonian joining us to break everything down from parades to king cake and some surprising facts you may not already know, so stay tuned for that. 'Tis the season of Mardi Gras. Laissez les bon temps rouler. We are letting the good times roll with celebrity historian Raffi Andonian, who is back to talk about the historical significance of Mardi Gras. Welcome back.
Hey.
In my Mardi Gras colors, by the way.
Yes.
Purple, yellow, of course, got the king cake
We got our
beats.
Yeah,
exactly.
ready to go. We're all celebrating.
Yeah.
So talk to us, what are the origins, Raffi, of Mardi Gras?
Medieval Europe is where you see Mardi Gras. Of course, it means Fat Tuesday. It's getting fattened up before you're going to do the abstinence of Lent, of course. It goes from the 12th day of Christmas on January 6th to Ash Wednesday just before Lent. You're still doing a decadence before you're going to do, you know, the sacrifices of Lent. Now, what's interesting when you come over to North America is that the initial Mardi Gras is actually in Mobile, Alabama. And from Mobile, Alabama, it will eventually get outlawed, if you will, or kind of fizzles out. It does get outlawed. There's all these kind of, controversies around it. And then eventually it pops up in New Orleans, in Louisiana, after Mobile. And when it pops up in Louisiana, there's different iterations of it in the 18th century. When Spain takes over in the late 18th century, the Louisiana Territory, it goes out again. So no more Mardi Gras at that point. It comes back under United States when the Louisiana Territory becomes part of the United States in the early 1800s. That's when Mardi Gras comes back as we know it, and it evolves over the 19th century. So, for example, in the middle part of the 19th century, in the 1850s, you have what's known as Mystic Krewe of Comas, which is the first time that they have a formal Mardi Gras with a formal parade after some students a generation prior to that, had come back from Paris and wanted to do the mass balls and everything like that, believe it or not. But they got a little bit out of hand and sometimes violent, so certain rules were coming back into play. And then eventually in the 1870s, you have Rex, one of the other famous, crews of Mardi Gras, which puts a king in place for the first time over the ceremonies. And the reason that matters is because that's where you get the colors of Mardi Gras. It was to honor the Russian Duke who was visiting Mardi Gras. First time you have daytime parades in the 1870s to honor him. And these colors, the purple, yellow, and green, were there to honor the family's coat of arms of the visiting Russian Duke. That's how you get those colors. And so that's what the colors actually mean. Purple is for justice, yellow, or the gold, is for power, and green is for faith. And that's how you get it. So the Russian story is how you get the colors of Mardi Gras.
Interesting.
Oh, that is interesting. I had no idea.
Quite the origins.
So let's talk about kind of the French influence in Arkansas. So how has that kind of, how have they influenced our state?
Some of the earliest settlements of European descent are of course French, right? In Arkansas is the Kapaw Indians, known as Arkansas. And what's interesting is the Kapaw Indians often allied with the French very closely. So they made alliances in military, in trade. They even teamed up against the English, the French versus the English. They even intermarried. One of the Kapaw chiefs was half French and half Kapaw, for example. So there's a lot of close alliance. So again, you go back to the Spanish. When the Spanish take over the Louisiana Territory, just like they didn't like Mardi Gras, they didn't like the Kapaw. And they also said, we're not going to trade with the French. Well, believe it or not, there are rebellions in New Orleans that turned violent by French and Kapaw. And eventually, that's these kinds of conflict is part of the reason that Spain got rid of Louisiana at some point to France, which of course then ended up in the United States, opened trade back up with France, and the French descendants here were happy once again, believe it or not.
Here, let me drop a fact on you about Arkansas and the French influence, because I was in an Arkansas history play for several years. So the name Arkansas is a French pronunciation of a Native American word. That's how we got the name of our state. And it really has nothing to do with the state of Kansas, although they are similar words, but the word Arkansas is entirely different than any of that. So,
that's right. Anyway. That's right. Yeah, it's a French pronunciation of a Kapaw term.
Yeah, there you go.
I could share a fun fact, but it's totally unrelated.
All right,
so
what's the fun fact?
So yeah, so okay, you mentioned why, like, how did Mardi Gras kind of get to Arkansas?
Arkansas, well, what happened is that across time, what happens in recent generations, there are iterations and imitations of Mardi Gras. It wasn't actually popular in the earlier time period that I'm talking about. Even Mardi Gras itself didn't really, I would say, take a foothold the way we know it in Louisiana until the 1870s. It was more recent than we would think, right, with some of the stories I was saying. But I would say over the course of the 1970s, you have this revival of Mardi Gras recognition across states, across the United States. So you see them in various places, this notion of reconnecting to roots of the past. And of course, you have the French influence in Arkansas. You have French influence in places like St. Louis, who also do Mardi Gras. So they bring these traditions back, much like you see, you know, in other cultural things like St. Patrick's Day, etc. But sometimes it's a little bit imagined in the sense that it was not as big a deal here back in the historical days as it wasn't in St. Louis, as it was later on to then, you know, imitate as New Orleans became. Yep, that's right. That's right. So that's how I would think about the Mardi Gras in that case. Now, I've been in Mardi Gras myself. I've been in a parade.
Yeah, we saw
there were some images up there. That's right,
Yes.
throwing out the beads and everything. Yep, so I've actually been in Mardi Gras, so legit stuff with legit king cake here.
Yeah, well, thanks for
Raffi.
legitimately joining us on the show today. We appreciate it. Stick around, we've got more fun happening. It's all coming up after this quick break.